in the 70s, when a lot of the original Chardonnay vines were planted, there was no real identity for Oregon Chardonnay. A lot of the original pioneers were planting Clonal and Draper and feeling like they're competing with California-style Chardonnay. And seeing that what they were developing here in Oregon was leaner, higher in acidity, not quite as rich, not as opulent, and being in a colder climate, felt like maybe these aren't the right genetics here for our climate. How can we sort of more accurately emulate California in a way? A lot of research led through the University of Dijon. Names would escape me. I don't know the people involved necessarily, but I know David Adelsheim here was largely the direct connect there here in Oregon, and then working on finding earlier ripening Chardonnay selections to kind of take more advantage of our climate, basically. And I think back then they were looking at trying to emulate something that was market driven instead of really trying to necessarily create a unique identity for Oregon, and sort of trying to find the best vehicle to express the terroir of Oregon. And so what ended up happening was in the late 80s, 86, 88, I think is when a lot of these Dijon cuttings started to come over. They were brought into Oregon State University to be quarantined and double checked, and then from there they kind of got released. And so there's all this early excitement thinking, okay, here's this new material, I think we can really do something great. Plantings were initially somewhat limited because there still weren't a lot of vineyards back then. And then say 5-6 years go by, and some people I know that made those conversions over to Dijon were actually really disappointed in the early stages. The vines weren't seemingly performing. But then once they were to get to a point, say 10 years of age or so, they felt that there was a lot more character and rebound that was happening where the vines were expressing more of the soil. And it just seemed to be that there was just this immediate excitement, like, okay, this is legitimate, like this is effectively going to get us to where we want to be. And so word spread, and then boom, it just kind of proliferated. The plantings now here in Oregon for Chardonnay, by percentage standard to Pinot Noir, is very small still. And the last statistic I looked at, I think, which is on the Oregon Chardonnay Alliance website, I think says that 92% of all the Chardonnay plantings that are here are planted to Dijon. And of the Dijon selections, it's 3 primary, Dijon 95, 96, and 76. And of those 3, it's primarily 96 and 76. So you have only a couple of different Chardonnay sort of genetic sources here that are still relatively young, and they're still kind of finding their own in the vineyards and everything. But they've now been around long enough where I think they're starting to prove that they're maybe now no longer ideal, completely ideal to the climate.